Okay. All right. We are recording. All right. All right. So cool. Let me just X this out. All right. All right. Well, let's get started. Welcome to Devs for Devs. We do presentations on different technical topics every week. And we're actually looking for people to present on whatever topics they want. And we will record them and put them up on YouTube. Like this one is going to go up on YouTube. Um, I find that having a recording of yourself presenting is a great way to show potential employers your personality and your way of explaining things. Hence the reason I'm doing it. So, if this is something that you want to try doing to get more comfortable talking about technical stuff, just let me know. Think of something that you want to present on, and then we will set you up. So tonight, we're going to be presenting on web accessibility. This is a topic that's personal to me as a neurodiverse person. And before becoming a software engineer, I used to work in disability rights advocacy, and I've even done presentations on disability and ableism when I worked as a special ed teacher. So yeah, this is a very important topic to me. So tonight's presentation is going to be structured like this. We're going to be doing a high-level overview of why knowing web accessibility is important and some like core concepts and tech for you to know about. And then we're just going to get our hands dirty with some code. We're going to mess around with the screen reader, and we're going to try to make our code accessible. So there's a GitHub repo associated with it. Yeah. So anyway, that's tonight. So why is this an important topic? Well, first of all, it's a human rights issue. Discrimination against people with disabilities is referred to as ableism, and it's no different from racism or sexism or homophobia or any of the other cancerous isms out there. And people with disabilities are actually considered the largest minority group in America. They're about 25% of Americans live with some kind of disability, like physical, cognitive, so like autism and ADHD, a visual impairment, or a hearing impairment. Like 25%, there's like 330 million people last time I checked. So when you think of 25% of that, that's like, I'm like doing the math in my head. It's like, I don't know, 80 million or something like that. That's a lot of people, And the other interesting thing about this group is that we can become disabled at any time, whether through an accident or, having a brain tumor or something like that. Having a brain tumor does affect your visual ability. The other reason it's important is the legal angle. So like particularly the Americans with Disabilities Act. The legal side's not that big a deal if you're working on like side projects with like 4 users or something like that. But if you're working at like, for example, Twitter or like TikTok or one of these sites that has like thousands or millions of daily users, then like, accessibility problems will become more obvious, and then you're going to be opening yourself up to lawsuits. So we will go over how to make your app or your site ADA compliant tonight. And the next reason is pretty important. It actually benefits more people than you might think. Disabled people, believe it or not, are not the only people who use accessibility features. I know there's people out there who like to, only use the keyboard to navigate their computer. And, there's also mobile users, with their smaller screens. So dexterity is out the window, or like low processing power. The way I think of it as like part of the curb cut effect. And the curb cut effect is based on an iconic story from the disability rights world. So before the 1970s, curbs didn't have those like little dips that go into the sidewalk. They became standard because a group of disabled activists from from Berkeley, California. They actually stole some wet cement from a construction site, and they used it to create a makeshift ramp on the curb. So that's how that started. But creating these little curb cuts, or whatever they're called, it benefited other people, not just people who use wheelchairs. Think about people who have babies in a stroller, or like construction workers dealing with heavy equipment, or like cyclists walking their bikes. you know um the point I really want to drive home with that is that when you invest in one disenfranchised group of people, you uplift not only that group but also other groups as well. So that's a pretty big reason to get into web accessibility. And the other, more selfish reason, if you're into that, is becoming a specialist. The web is by itself is actually pretty accessible, but as technology grew in complexity, it became less accessible. And it was nothing to do with the technologies themselves. It was more to do with the developers who used those technologies. We have like some bad habits, like making everything a div, or not making buttons clickable on a keyboard. But if you're a specialist, if you're a web accessibility specialist or accessibility engineer, whatever the term is, you could be that person who makes those catches, and you could potentially bring more customers in to whatever company you work for in the future. So, that's, the capitalist reason for doing it. So yeah, that's my spiel on why you should learn it. So if you want to learn more about web accessibility, the most important thing you need to know to make your website compliant is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG for short. So WCAG lays out all the different things that you can do to make your websites accessible, and they're broken up into four. Actually, before I go on, I'm just gonna drop a link in the chat to WCAG, just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Okay. So, all right, where was I? Oh yes, WCAG. So so WCAG breaks down its recommendations into 4 different categories: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So yeah, it's broken down like that. But the most important thing that you should understand about WCAG are the 3 conformance levels. Single A, I don't know if it's called level A, level double A, triple A, right? So double A would be like the bare minimum to make a website accessible, but not quite sufficient. And they're also easy to implement. And then triple A would be like, like guidelines that are harder to implement, but would help you reach a wider range of people with disabilities. So like, I guess the best way to describe it is, think of like a painting app, where you would traditionally imagine yourself maybe using a mouse to use it. So to make that accessible, single A would mean you would put a little tip or something in the app that says, this feature is only available for mouse users. And then AAA would mean you make the painting app, you make it so that you can use the painting app completely within your keyboard. So, I mean, if you were to do that, you'd have a lot of work cut out for you. But the best middle ground for you to pursue is the double A, which is the minimum level you need to be at to be considered ADA compliant. And I mean, if you're looking through the WCAG standards and they seem like they're kind of wordy, that's because they are. It was kind of like one of those things that was designed by committee. So like, the language used is kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It's definitely not very accessible. So I'm going to post a link to WebAIM's interpretations of those standards, because they're a little easier to digest, in my opinion. So yeah, aim for double A standard compliance and use WebAIM to kind of make sense of all the standards. All right. Next. All right, so technologies. So this is the last slide before we get into the code. I'm just going to give a quick rundown of the different technologies that you'll need to know to become an accessibility engineer. So screen readers is the first thing. We're going to be using that tonight, and it's mainly going to be for debugging purposes, to hear how a website reads on a screen reader. The other thing you need to understand is semantic HTML. And it's not a hard concept to wrap your head around. Like, all you have to do is Google semantic HTML, and you'll see lists of like all the different tags you could use that are considered semantic. And I would recommend using semantic tags whenever you can. Like, don't just use divs or spans. And the only time you'd use those is if you can't find an HTML element that does what you want. But please use semantic HTML whenever you can, because it helps screen readers parse the website and help users navigate them through a screen reader. And what else did I have to say? Oh yeah, definitely don't do like div class footer. Just use footer. It's also considered a lot cleaner. And the other thing that you need to know about is Aria. If you've never heard of Aria, it's basically a supplement to HTML, and it's a set of rules and attributes specifically invented to make web elements more accessible. And there's a lot on Aria, and there could easily be a separate presentation on it because there's just a lot of Aria attributes. So I'm only going to go over a few of them, and it should actually be treated as a last resort anyway. Like, as you see right here, the first rule of Aria, I really don't like this sentence, but basically it's saying, like, if you can find an HTML element that does what you want without using Aria and is accessible, use that element. Aria is meant to be used as a last resort. All right. Okay, all right, now let's jump into some code now. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Okay, so now we're gonna open up our GitHub, open up the code from the GitHub repo, and I would like you to open up the HTML and navigate to the form page. Okay, let me know when you've gotten there. Okay, all right. So now now that you're on the form page, I want you to dim the screen, and I want you to try filling out the form on the page using only your screen reader and your keyboard. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. All right, have you tried it yet? Okay. Yeah. And you can unmute yourself. I was just wondering, like, how did that feel using the screen reader?
So I have a visual impairment. Like, I wear glasses. My vision's not that great. So I definitely need. Oh, sorry. I don't know if you can hear the.
I can, yeah. It's okay.
Sorry about that. I was trying to exit it before. But it's really helpful on VS Code to have that. It going over each of the items for me, because if I didn't have access to that, I would not be able to fill this out at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, I kind of like before I became a software engineer, I would do this kind of exercise with people, and like they're always shocked by like, how deprived they are of their senses, and it's like, people have been doing stuff, like people have been using screen readers for a while, and like, some people use it really fast, and like it's just a whole other way of kind of being on the internet. So, all right. So now, what did I say we were going to do next? Okay, yeah. All right. So now let's go to the home page. And we're going to try making this page more accessible. So we're going to start simple. The first thing, actually, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, okay. I see. All right. There we go. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, we're going to start small. We are going to start by adding an alt attribute to this picture of my blue tongue skink. She loves reading. So basically, it's very simple. We're just going to add an alt tag. And so actually, so before I go on, the alt attribute is actually very important to have there, whether you leave it blank or not. And the reason for this is because if a screen reader comes across an image and there's no alt attribute, it's not going to know what to do with it. I don't know if you've used React, but like if you've used React, you might have noticed like in the linter it says like, if you put an image and you leave out the alt attribute, React does get kind of mad at you and says put an alt attribute to be accessible. So if you don't put the alt attribute, most of the time the screen reader, I think mine just like, it just doesn't know what to do with it. I know other screen readers just read out the file name, which is just not accessible. So I recommend either leaving the alt attribute blank like this, or add something to it and pick something descriptive like a lizard reading a book. Yeah, it's up to you how specific you want to get, but this is a pretty decent amount of specificity. All right, so that was easy. All right, so now there is a problem with this form here. Try to use your screen reader and tell me what the issue is.
Okay. I'm going to turn mine back on.
Yeah, you're going to be turning yours on an awful lot, so yeah. I'm going to do it too. So did you find the issue?
For me, it likes repeating the Google Chrome legacy window over and over.
Oh man. Yeah, no, mine does that too, but that's not the issue. So I don't know if you noticed, but if you go through the form, it doesn't tell you what you're supposed to put in the form. Like, how visually it says first name, last name, email, but if you actually tab over the inputs, it's not going to tell you what to put in.
Right.
Yeah, which is a huge issue. So what you could do to fix that is add a label attribute, and then what you can do is create a for attribute for the wait. Did I say labels attribute? I meant to say it was a tag. Add a label tag, and add a for attribute, and let's just call this first. And then for the input that you want to associate with the label, you have to set the ID to whatever you set to the for attribute. So for example, the first name label should have, the label tag should have a for attribute of first, and the input should have an ID of also first. And now let's just do that with the rest of them. I'm going to do that with you.
Yeah, this is great to do because if my vision was even worse or, my screen was even dimmer, I wouldn't be able to see where is the field for me to put in the information.
Mm-hmm. It's a huge problem, yeah. And yeah, like I feel like forms are like where you really want to like do well with accessibility, because like this is how people sign up for your services, and if they can't read the form,
Yes.
why would they bother signing up? So yeah, that's definitely an issue. All right, so now that we have this, once you run it through the screen reader, which I'm going to try to do now, you should actually let me just put it on, and let me put this over here. I don't know if you guys can see my screen reader. Oh, okay. All right. So now, so now you see it says right here. Oh, let me just mute my, yeah. Yeah. So notice that like now the screen reader tells you what the label says. So like I'm on the first name input, it actually says first name. Last name input actually says last name. Email input actually says last name. So that is really cool. Now I'm going to change this to accessible, because now that's accurate. All right. All right. So what other things that I want to do? Let me just mute this. Okay. Go to home. Okay. So now we're gonna talk about bit about Aria and tab index. Tab index is probably going to be a very useful feature for you to know. So we're going to go to the counter page. So it's literally just like a fake post saying, "Hey guys, how are you?" And then this post is just going viral real quick. Yeah. All right. So here's what we're gonna do. We are going to make this accessible using tab index and Aria. So we're gonna start with tab index because I think that's a very easy concept for us to grasp. So first, let's tab bar, home, form, counter, and oh, it doesn't go into the post. What's up with that? Well, there is a handy feature. So I'm going to go into my code editor over here. I'm going to create an attribute called tab index. And what tab index does is it takes in a numeric value. I mean, here it looks like a string, but it's really a number, right? So we have a tab index. Basically, what this is, if you set the tab index to 0, all you're saying is make this element tabbable. So I added tab index to here. So watch, I'm going to go back here and look at that. Now the block quote is tabbable.
That's really cool.
Thank you. And so now what happens if we put in other numbers? Let's say we put in 1, and to really illustrate this point, I'm going to need another tab index. So I'm going to put tab index, make that 2. Now let's start over. So we have this. Oh, okay. Wait, hold on. Why did it do that? Let me try again. Okay, so yeah, home, form, counter. Oh, okay, I see why that's happening. Okay. All right, so actually, hold on. Let me reload this page. It didn't work like that before. Okay. Okay, all right, I understand what happened here. So basically, when you hit tab for the first time on a page, whatever has a tab index of 1 will be tabbed first, and then whatever is, it just goes in sequential order like that. Pretty obvious. And to make this point clearer, let's flip the order and let's see what we get this time. And look at that, the paragraph tag is being tabbed first, and then the block quote. All right. So now what happens if we put in a negative number? Let's say -1. And we'll just set that to 0. Now let's start from here. Okay, so this is working as expected, home form counter, and then it goes to the p tag, and it just skips the block quote completely. So if you have a negative number for your tab index, that that element is just going to be passed over. So I normally when I do this, I just set all the tab indexes to 0. I mean, like if you really want things to go in a certain order, you can use the positive numbers. I personally don't know of a use case for the negative numbers yet, but you know, that's a work in progress. But anyway, now let's talk about Aria. There's a lot to Aria. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to use Aria using a simple attribute called live. So what I want to happen is, you see how this number is incrementing here. I want to make it so that my screen reader tells me whenever this number updates. So there's an attribute called Aria Live, and it has 3 settings. Well, off is one setting, and that's default. And it also has a polite setting and an assertive setting. So let's see what happens if we put in assertive and assertive. All right, and you can only perceive the changes when you use the screen reader. And turn it on and prepare to be annoyed. So, come on. See, so if you look here, notice, this is annoying in my ears. So notice here that it's basically telling you whenever this thing changes, right? So now let's set it to polite real quick. What polite does is it updates you. It will still update you frequently, but it won't interrupt you trying to read the page. So like if you're trying to navigate through the nav bar, like it'll still read it, but then like once it's done reading it, it'll go straight back to updating you, right? Whereas with assert, it would just interrupt and just be kind of annoying. And it's definitely kind of an annoying feature to have, but it's useful for example, like let's say you're using Uber and your car is out front. You know, this would be a good use case for using the assertive property of Aria Live. Okay, so yeah, so that is one use case of Aria. All right, so I wanted to do a couple more things. Okay, what did I have next on my checklist? Go back to homepage. Okay, so now that you know what tab index and Aria Live does, let's go back to the homepage, and we are going to continue messing with Aria a little bit. So now we are going to use Aria to turn this button into a div. Now, why would you do something like that, you ask? Well, you know, it could be for styling purposes. Like, for example, like I always have a hard time styling buttons. Like there's like buttons are so, I love buttons. They're very useful, but for some reason, buttons and CSS they just don't get along. A button is just, it just wants to, it has its own idea of what it wants to be. But if we turned it into a div, we can make it function basically like a button. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to turn this button into a div. This is definitely not good programming practices, but I'm just going to demonstrate what you can do with Aria. So one thing you can do is you can add a role. This is a unique attribute attribute, yeah, attribute, that you can use to change how a screen reader interprets the role of something in your document. So we're gonna treat this div like it's a button, right? So now look at that. It's lost all the stylings of a button, right? So we're actually going to add a bunch more attributes to this. Again, this is probably not best practices. I'm just showing you what you can do with with accessibility to make things accessible. All right. So now we have the roll down. Now we just have to make it reachable by tabbing. So we are going to add a tab index of 0. What else do we need to add? Oh yeah, so now we have to make it so that it actually does this as well. So we're gonna have to add an on click. So not on submit, it's on click. Yeah. I'm actually gonna change this to this one because it's now accessible. All right, so now we made it so that you can click on it. We made it so that you can tap to it, but you know, if we tab to it, it doesn't work. It just it doesn't work. You know why? Because we didn't make it so that you can use the keyboard to activate it. So we're going to add an attribute called on key up or down. It's one of those two. I'm just going to say that for now, and then we'll just add this. Yeah, it'll do the same. It'll basically like do the same thing as when you click on it. But so let's say I fill out this form and I click enter. See that it works. All right, now the final issue here that I want to address is that sometimes it's not clear what a button is supposed to do just from what the screen reader tells you, right? So like, you know, there might be visual cues that tell you what the button's supposed to do that the screen reader just doesn't pick up on. So luckily, we have something called Aria Label. And what this does is when you tap over the element, it tells you what it does. So Aria Label, what we could put here is alert user to submission of data. And so I'm going to turn on the screen reader. Oh, God, it's so annoying. Like, you know, like working with screen readers, it's like, it's kind of fun, but it's also kind of annoying because like it's constantly talking over my thoughts. But anyway, so let's take a look at, let's see what happens when I tab over the submit button. Alert user to submission of data. It says that right there. See? So, yep, we have created basically a button out of a div, and we made it accessible using all of these attributes right here. Oh my God, I'm going to turn this off. Okay. This thing's always annoying, but all right. All right, so I would like to try one last thing before I end the presentation for tonight. And it's going to be something called a skip link. Now, a skip link would be useful if you have like a ton of elements in your navbar. So basically, a skip link is there to help a user basically just skip through the navbar instead of just like tabbing through it. See, okay, yeah. So what we're gonna do, so we are going to create a skip link. We are going to prepend it to the navbar, all right? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually make it so that it's hidden off the page and make it so that it only appears when it's focused on using tabs. So the way that works, let's say I want to take, yeah, let's make it so that once you hit skip this button. So this is sort of the this is sort of this is what they all say, skip to main content. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an ID of whatever the content we want to skip to is. Let's say we want to go to here. Let's call this heading, and then we'll have it go to there. Okay. So obviously you don't want it to just show like that. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to make it hidden. All right. And make it only appear when it's focused on through tab, not even through the mouse. So we are going to create a class of, what should we call it? Skip link. Let's call it skip link. All right, so I'm going to go into the style tab, and we are going to make it so that it is not there. Skip link. All right. So we're going to like move it way off the page. Like some people put like display none. I like to move it off the page. So we're going to give it a position of absolute. Top of 0, we might not need that attribute, but I like to be explicit. Left negative 200% to be safe. And I also, actually, before we do all of that, I'm just going to leave it here just so I can style it the way I want. All right. Yeah, sorry, it's up there. Okay, so I'm gonna basically create like an orange box around it. So let's do background color orange. Let's give it some padding to make it look nice. What else do I need? Let's see. That's good enough for now. It's not the most beautiful thing, but I mean, I would say like in your real projects, if you wanted to use a skip link, I would have the style of it match the brand of whatever the website you're making has. Because a lot of people, like not just non-cited users, would use the tabs. So like, you know, you don't want to have this like really gorgeous website and then you have a skip to main content button that looks like this. You don't want that. Not at all. So what we're going to do, I mean, this looks good enough. So I'm going to have it go off to the side. I said I'm going to have it go off to the side. Oh, why is it not? Oh, wow, I am okay. All right, there we go. That makes sense. All right, so now let's add a what is it? A focus state. All right, so now we're just when we set the focus when what am I saying? When a skip link becomes focus, we are going to make it so that it actually appears on the screen. Right? So look, it's not there, but I can. What? Okay. So there we go. So let's say we start here. Yep. So when I hit tab, the first thing I get is skip to main content. And where does that take me? It takes me to the heading. And if I had my screen reader, it would probably be reading the heading for me. Actually, I'm going to do that to make sure it works. Chrome is not responding. What? Oh. Document. Okay. Oh, it didn't make it. Oh, wait. I might need to add tab index. All right. Hopefully this works. There we go. There we go. Yeah. Yep. Tab index is such a lifesaver. It's honestly, I think tab index is like, it's one of the more useful things that you can learn to to up your accessibility skills. Just like tab index everything, you know. But yeah, I mean, that's about all I have. Obviously, there's a lot more to accessibility than I've shown you tonight. I just wanted to kind of give you a primer to accessibility, like some core principles of it. And, you know, hopefully I've given you enough study materials so that you can sort of do this by yourself. Yeah, it's a really deep topic that you can spend hours and hours on. You know, people spend years, people have whole jobs devoted to this stuff. So yeah, yeah, that's about all I have for today. Do you have any questions? I don't think I've ever asked if you had any questions. Do you have any questions?
I do. I was wondering, with the tab index, how you're setting it to 0, and it goes in order by the cascade, right? Top to bottom, it just goes down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. It's just in the order of all the elements as they're written in the HTML document.
And I like that the button, you had it in an absolute position. And I know you said before about display,
Yeah.
but it sounds like the absolute position would be better to do than display none, right? Because it might not get picked up if it's not being displayed.
Yeah, I've actually had issues implementing it through display none. I just find using positioning to be a lot more reliable personally. You know, I mean, you could probably try opacity as well. I've never tried opacity, but that might be one. Yeah. You know, but like yeah, you can do all kinds of like crazy stuff with it and like make it look nice. But yeah.
'Cause I
And
like that the button appears and then it goes away when you don't need it anymore. That's really cool.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's super handy when you have like a ton of stuff in your nav bar. Like a lot of
Yes.
modern websites do, you know. Like just imagine me like tap 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 all day long. No way.
And then the div, like you turning the button into a div, that's really, and I like how you said how it's not best practice, but it does increase accessibility. And that's
Yeah.
just that's really interesting to me because I haven't looked too much into the standards, and I'll look at the sites that you've sent in the chat, and thank you for that.
Mm.
But that is really interesting how, in some ways, this is better for accessibility than not having it.
Oddly enough, yeah, like, you know, I remember I did say earlier that like, you know, divs and spans should be avoided, but like they do have a place. You just have to be willing to like put the work put the work into like making it accessible, you know. And yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure, like with the different standards, the A and the double A and the triple A, it's like there are specialists that review, I guess, companies that are looking for that standard, or
Mhm.
I don't know, that whole world of kind of like assessing or analyzing a site, determining how accessible it is. That's like a really interesting uh, type of career for people to have.
Yeah. I mean, I know people have actually gone down that route, you know, like I remember like back from my disability rights days, like I know someone who also just went and became an accessibility engineer like a few years later, you know, like it's pretty lucrative from what I hear. And you know, it's very easy to be an expert in it. There's like, you know, this is something that people don't really think about, I notice.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is, but you know, this is the world we live in. But yeah.
If I wanted to look at the video again, just to see like the code and just seeing your thought process as you're going through, what's your YouTube channel or any place where you're posting the recording?
Oh, I'm gonna post this on Devs for Devs.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna try to get a video up by sometime tomorrow, this video.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for coming, Jacqueline. All right. So I'm going to end it here. Go to sleep if it's that time for you. All right. I'm going to go to sleep. It's 10 o'clock. All right.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Good night. Thanks for attending.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.